Good afternoon, everybody. This is Andrew Ross Sorkin from DealBook and the New York Times. Thanks so much for joining us. This is our first DealBook helpline. And over the next 40 minutes, we're hoping to spend some time with you to really try to answer some questions and try to offer some practical advice for those of you out there that are trying to navigate this crazy world we're all living in during this COVID era, how to deal with very basic business issues and maybe some more complicated ones as well. I imagine we'll talk about renegotiating rent, getting access to an SBA loan, how to deal with employees, furloughing them, laying them off, what's the best way to deal with suppliers. We might even talk a little bit about the morality of taking money and what that's going to mean. I am joined this morning by Jason Carrion, DealBook editor, who's been on these calls the past couple of weeks, and he'll be leading the Q&A in just a minute. I'm also joined and thrilled to have Stephen Amder with us. He's a partner at Pillsbury, Winthrop, Shaw Pittman, one of the great counselors to the world of corporate America and business. He's an expert on all of these issues. And if there's somebody I could talk to about these things for hours, it would be Stephen. And I should tell you that I have known Stephen for practically all my life. So I'm thrilled that he could join us. I have also followed the works of Gene Marks from the Marks Group for so long. And he is one of the great consultants and advisors to business people all across this country, and has been spending his time dealing with and thinking about the questions that all of you are dealing with and thinking about. So it was thrilling when he decided to join this phone call and help answer some of your questions today. A couple just quick housekeeping notes. This call is being recorded. We will offer a replay both in the newsletter tomorrow, as well as on social media and on nytimes.com. For those of you on Zoom here, I just want to tell you this is a audio-only call. There is no video. We do it as an audio-only call, so you can listen. And in fact, if you have work or other things, you can avert your eyes and do those things that you need to do at the same time. And then finally, because we want this to be as interactive as humanly possible, so many of you have already submitted questions prior to the call, but as you're listening to the call, and if you have questions right now and throughout the call, you can do that and submit additional questions at the Q&A window, which is on this app as we speak. The majority of this call, as I said, will be dedicated to answering your questions. I thought I'd start just by kicking this off with Gene and Steve real quick, and then we'll get to those questions. But Gene, the question I'd start with you is just getting access to these loans. We keep hearing about so many business owners who have relationships with banks, sometimes big banks, even like a Wells Fargo. Some of them may have outstanding debt at those banks, some don't, and they're still unable to get access to those loans. They're being sent to smaller community banks in other parts of the country to try to get access to these loans. What's your single biggest piece of advice right now for somebody who can't get access to the loan?
I would actually, Andrew, by the way, thanks for having me on and for the kind words. I'm also a big fan. For those of you that are looking for loans, particularly under the Paycheck Protection Program, turning to your bank is certainly, it would be the first option you would consider, but I am hearing exactly what you've heard about people being sort of turned down. They need to be existing customers, even ones that have longtime customers are having to wait. But really, one of the best sources out now are a lot of the online lenders, Andrew. PayPal and Square, QuickBooks Capital, as well as Lendio and Cabbage with a K. Those are just a few of the online platforms that have now been given permission from the Treasury Department to issue those loans. And I'm hearing, early on some positive things about them. I think one of the biggest reasons why is because those platforms are actually set up to handle a larger volume, and they have the technology and the infrastructure to go through the process for applying and verifying and getting information in actually quicker than a lot of the banks do, particularly the community banks. So, if you're listening to this and you're thinking of applying, or you're really struggling with your banker, I would strongly consider going to one of those online lenders and applying through there. I think you might be happy with the experience.
Do you have to have had an ongoing relationship with Square, for example? You have to use that service in your
Nope.
store so they have access? No, you don't?
No, you don't. And what's interesting about that is the online lenders are actually doing something that I wish the banks were doing. They want small businesses to come to them because they want to begin and build relationships with them, and they see this as an opportunity to start those relationships. And unfortunately, I can't say the same for some banks out there that seem like they're turning those potential relationships away. So no, in most cases, you do not need to have a prior financial relationship with them.
That's really great advice. Thank you for that. Hey, Steve, we were talking about this last night. You obviously advise lots of different startups and other companies that oftentimes may be backed by either private equity or venture capital or have complicated ownership structures. Speak to some of that issue, because I know it's been an issue for a lot of startups, given that they do have ostensibly backing and what's called affiliation, and how that works when it comes to getting these loans.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, of course, for having me and for the kind words of introduction. The affiliation tests have been a major obstacle for a number of our clients in the private equity and venture capital space. As the programs administered through the Small Business Administration, absent other legislative advice, the SBA has been using the standard rules that they apply with respect to all loans that are eligible under the SBA Act. And that imposes the same affiliation test that would otherwise be applied. Now, affiliation picks up more than just what some people would ordinarily think of with respect to affiliation. You can be deemed affiliated based upon some ownership thresholds. You can be affiliated based upon some control rights that you have. And so many private equity and venture capital backed companies are finding themselves deemed affiliated with the funds, whether or not there's actual true control or ownership control, solely based upon the rights that are imposed by agreements in connection with those investments.
Hey, Steve, back up though for just half a second. So let's just pretend for a moment that I'm a gas station, and I'm a gas station that has the backing though of some outside investor, whether that is a established sort of classic private equity firm or maybe just an individual investor that's invested in me, but maybe that investor is also invested in 5 other businesses in my community. How does that change my ability to get access to one of these loans?
So great question, Andrew. And the affiliation tests require you to assess whether or not you are deemed affiliated by the SBA rules, which is a facts and circumstances dependent answer. And the rules are unfortunately not all that clear in many cases. There are specific sets of rights that the SBA has said you absolutely can have and not be deemed affiliated. And there are specific rights that they have said leads to a determination of affiliation. Right. And while the SBA takes a position that it's, extraordinary rights mean you're not affiliated, and day-to-day control means you are affiliated, the SBA's rules of what day-to-day control constitutes are different from what many people think they are. So if, for example, you can't take on new debt without that investor's consent, you're deemed affiliated with that investor. And so your employees are aggregated with that investor's employees for his other companies or her other companies or its other companies to determine whether or not you hit the 500 ownership test.
Interesting. Got it.
And many investors have been asked to waive certain rights by companies that have been paying attention to this. And many are willing to do so. Many are not willing to do so. And so it's become a push and a pull between the investor community and the business community to see whether these rights are available.
Got it. Hey, Jason, I see even more questions coming in as we speak. So I'm gonna throw it straight over to you so we can get right into them.
Okay, let's do it. So a few variations on this that we got by email and currently on the call. Tammy on the call says she's a self-employed hairstylist with no employees. What advice can you give her for financial help? And then also related to that, Amber, who wrote in by email before, is a private yoga teacher, an LLC, and her client base is unable to continue paying her at the moment. And she's kind of wondering what she should do. What sorts of options do these kind of sole proprietor companies have?
This is Gene. I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There are definitely options if you're a sole proprietor or an independent contractor. I mean, first of all, you can apply for unemployment insurance. Because of the stimulus program, the states have been told now that they need to accept independent contractors and sole proprietors, and you can apply for that, whatever you're entitled to, for unemployment plus the additional $600 a week, which goes through July. The downside to that is that, and I'm sure you guys are seeing this as well, most of the states are a mess right now. They have not been set up to, this is like the first time they're ever dealing with giving unemployment to independent contractors and sole proprietors. And so they're kind of scrambling to figure out how to verify that income. A lot of their websites aren't set up to do that, so they're trying to fix that as well. Plus, they're getting inundated with claims, so that's slowing down the process. And by the way, there's a pandemic going on, and most of them are working from home, so it's all adding to the problems. That's pushing back getting checks. But again, if you're an independent contractor, it's certainly an option. You just are going to have to be a little bit patient. Your second option, of course, is you can apply for a loan under the Paycheck Protection Program. It was open last Friday to independent contractors and sole proprietors as well. The key to that is that when you're trying to estimate your income, it's the SBA has been basing it, or the banks are basing it, based on your self-employment income. So some people say like, oh, I don't really give myself a paycheck, I don't have a payroll. But if you look at your tax return for last year and you see what you made from what you were taxed from a self-employment income standpoint, that's your income, and that's what you can use in the calculation, the 2.5 times payroll calculation, plus your health, if you paid health insurance as well, state taxes for payroll. You can figure all that into the calculation and see what you're eligible for. And one of the other benefits is you can get some forgiveness for the cost of your rent or utilities as well. So those are the two big options that you have, and I would consider exploring both of them. Although you can't have one, you can't have them both. You got to choose in the end which one you think would be the most income for you.
Hey, Gene, just to put a fine point on that, in terms of the amount of money that you could get loan, the amount of money you could get loaned to you, and then how much of that can ultimately be forgiven so that effectively turns into a grant.
So first of all, one of the big restrictions that I should have mentioned as well is that you are restricted to the first $100,000 of your income. So, for the woman who's a hairstylist, if she was making $120,000 a year, and good for you if you are, by the way, the first 100,000 would count towards that calculation. When it comes time for forgiveness, the clock starts ticking when you get your loan. It's an 8-week consecutive period. After the 8 weeks is over, you go back to the bank and you give your documentation as to what your income was during that period and ask for forgiveness. You can also get forgiven, again, for your rent and for your utilities or mortgage interest you're paying if it's related to your business. However, that cannot be more than 25% of the total forgiveness. In other words, 75% of that, whatever's forgiven, has got to be to payroll. If loans don't get forgiven, though, if the amounts don't get forgiven, they're going to stay outstanding as a loan at 1% interest, payable back in 2 years, and you don't have to make your first payment until 6 months from now. So it's a pretty low cost way of getting financing.
Right. Steve, I think maybe this one is for you. Kamal, who's on the call, asks what options are available for commercial landlords whose sole income is rental property. He said he's tried the Paycheck Protection Program and also for a disaster loan. But a lot of those seem to be based on the number of employees. So what are landlords supposed to do?
So certainly a great question. And we're having lots of conversations with real estate clients who are facing a similar situation. I think one key thing is to start having conversations with your tenants to understand what the likely payment plans are going to be for those tenants, what they're facing and how to deal with it. Number two is to start having the same conversations with your lenders to see what opportunities there are to discuss the terms of your current payment program, what potential forbearance opportunities may be available. There's really no perfect solution right now based upon the universe of remedies that have been available from the government. Though certainly people are continuing to have conversations, and our public policy group is regularly having discussions with legislators about potential new sources of funding that are targeted at particular areas of interest. I think certainly it's reasonable to suggest that the current administration would have a friendly attitude towards the trials and tribulations of large real estate holders, but nevertheless, the opportunities aren't perfect. There are potential availabilities for the economic injury disaster loans. I do think that some of those may have the greatest likelihood of recourse for current landlords. And the Main Street lending program looks like there may be additional opportunities there as well, though, again, depending on the terms and conditions of particular real estate operations, partnerships, et cetera, the restrictions on dividends and upstream flows of capital from those partnerships to the ultimate holders may present some difficulties for long-term funding of personal operations. And so what I'd say is it's worth exploring all of the current opportunities that there are right now today. It's worth writing to your congressman to say that you need additional resources because you don't feel that what's in there today helps your plight. Because I think the reality is that nobody is currently expecting that the universe of programs that's in place today is going to be the total universe of programs that's necessary to get everyone through this. And so continuing to push legislators to explore additional opportunities, I think, is certainly a recommended path of action.
And can I also add, this is Gene again. That was great, Andrew, and all of those sources are really really helpful, particularly to landlords. There's we never really talk about some of the corporate programs that are available. Some big companies have been stepping up with grants and loan programs for small businesses, which include landlords and real estate companies. I mean, Facebook has set up a $100 million grant program. This is for like cash grants that they're going to be given, they say, to 30,000 small businesses. JP Morgan has set up a program as well. The Opportunity Fund, which is a nonprofit, has set up or is in the process of setting up both grants and loan programs to small businesses. So I just want to say one of the biggest holes in this is affecting landlords and property people, because the Paycheck Protection Program, these kinds of loans were really meant not to replace income, but to subsidize your operations and keep people employed. But some of those corporate grant programs are available that could help, see you through this.
Right. And there's a lot of questions coming in about negotiating rent. To look at it from the tenant's point of view, Mina, who's on the line, and also Mab, write in to talk about sort of just how to approach that. How should tenants approach talking to their landlords about renegotiating or not paying at all, or just what's sort of best practice for approaching that quite fraught discussion?
So it's Steve. My approach in all negotiations is to be a forthright negotiator and be upfront with the actual situation that you're facing and have an open and honest discussion. And again, I think your landlord will likely be interested in knowing that you're seeking potential sources of funding and would probably fairly want a portion of that funding or a commitment to pay a portion of that funding if and when received. But I think landlords are being fairly pragmatic to the fact that foot traffic has slowed, if not stopped, and the ability of different businesses to pay rent is really going to be dependent on the facts and circumstances.
Right. Hey, Steve, though, it's Andrew here, real quick, and maybe Gene can answer this. Is it, when you have this terrible conversation, is this something that you think should be a phone call? Should start as a letter? Today Tesla sent out a letter to all of its landlords across the country and said they're not paying. And they started the conversation by saying, we are just not, they explained their situation and said, we're not paying this month, as opposed to, and that's how they sort of anchored the discussion. What's your best advice for trying to begin the conversation itself? Is that a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a text? And sort of when you begin it, do you sort of start with I can't do this, I'm not doing this? Or is it, let's figure out where we can go here?
Yeah, look, I think everybody's situation is going to be different depending on the relationship and the negotiating power of the parties. If you've got a long-term relationship with your landlord, I think starting from the position of we're not paying is a good way to ensure that long-term relationship, which probably has had some ups and downs over the years, goes to a bad place pretty quickly, because again, that landlord may be suffering very similar issues as you. So I would say the relationship and the communication should be consistent with the relationships and the communications that you've had with the landlord previously. If you want to be treated like a human, you should treat the other person on the other side of that conversation like a human too.
100%. Steve, can you imagine just sending a letter to your landlord? We're not paying, sorry. You're absolutely right. Some states, depending on what state you're located in, and cities like where I'm in Philadelphia, have actually instituted, laws or rules saying during this pandemic as it is, they're forbidding landlords from asking, rents from their tenants if tenants can't pay. So that's certainly something you should look into locally. But also what Steve said is 100% right. I mean, a lot of landlords are small businesses themselves, and depending on what your relationship that you already have with your landlord, you should be calling them up, seeing them face to face, and working it out. There's no reason to get all legal and formal about it. At least,
Gene, you can't
initially.
do it face to face anymore. You got to have 6 feet in front of you.
Oh, that's a good point. Well, you wear a mask. You stand apart. Or you go on Zoom.
Right. True. Sensible advice. So a specific question here from Ben, who's on the call about the small business loan. If our normal raise and bonus cycle lands in early July, would that potentially be an issue with taking the loan? Gene, that might be for you.
Yeah, happy to take that one. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to show comparable periods as to when this is. I mean, the rule of thumb is that to come up with what your loan availability is, you're supposed to show the preceding 12 months of what your operations were. But some people have different businesses. They have seasonal businesses or, things that depend on other factors. So, if you're going to be asking for loan forgiveness for a period of time, 8 weeks going forward, you want to have loan availability for that. You have to show the comparable period from the prior year to say, hey, listen, this is what the payroll is that I'm going to need during this period because I'm a seasonal business. I have a friend who has a fruit and vegetable stand, and he's getting things starting up in May because he's a summer business. And that's exactly the conversation that we have just had. I mean, remember, in the end, this is not an agreement between you and the SBA. This is going to be an agreement between you and your lender. So the SBA has given guidelines to the lenders. Some of them are pretty strict, and some of them are not as strict. And I think there's some room to negotiate that with your vendor, with your bankers, your lenders, to make sure that you're both comfortable with the numbers that you're using.
Right. I mean, perfect follow-up on that from Walter, who's on the call. What recourse does he have if you think a loan was improperly denied or for a much lower amount than it should be in his mind? And this goes, I think, obviously for the small business loans, but for any of the other programs too.
Who is that for?
Go ahead, Gene, and then we'll bring Steve in later.
I'm interested to hear Steve's views on this because I'm actually we're still trying to figure out the process of how things go through compliance and approval. Each loan, you can only ask for a loan once under your federal tax ID number. So my assumption is once you apply for a loan, it gets assigned a number from the SBA, and then you're in the system. and that's it. So if it gets denied or approved for a lower amount, I believe, you're out of options at that point in time. I don't think you can go back in and reapply. So that's my understanding for, about what it is right now. And Steve, I don't know if you've seen anything different.
No, I haven't seen anything different, at least so far, but I think you make the excellent point that a lot of these rules are all being written as we go.
Right.
And so there may be an appeals process that's put in place. There may be some rules that come down from the SBA. Certainly, as the funds start depleting, as people run out of available resources under the policies and still have issues and still are seeking funding and still are asking, I think you may start to see either new programs put in place or an expansion of the existing program, or a formal appeals process or other program implemented by the SBA to give people the opportunity to ask for their treatment to be revisited.
Hey, I have a question that I keep getting from lots of different people that I wanted to ask on behalf of the audience, which is there's a lot of business people out there that are thinking about whether to furlough their employees, take the loan, keep them on, but do so knowing, or at least worried, that this pandemic and the shutdown or stay-at-home orders either stay on, or that they're in the retail business and don't expect people to come back into their stores in any meaningful way come the summer, come the fall, and what may look like a liquidity problem today will become a solvency problem tomorrow. Would you advise those companies to take the loan, knowing and keep their employees on so you can get the loan forgiveness later, or would you advise laying those employees off and either taking the loan but then obviously not getting the grant, or not taking the loan? How would you think about that if you think that this is going to be a longer, more challenging process for your business over even a shorter period of time? Gene?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I get these questions a lot, mainly because it's all about timing, right? So let's just make sure that we all, if you just, the facts here, which is, although the program ends, you can apply up until June 30th. The 8-week period starts from when you get the loan. So, one thing that you can consider is saying, hey, maybe I'll just hold off and, apply as late as possible. And then when I get the loan, that's when the clock starts ticking. If you do that, you're running the risk that, the fund may run out of money, and therefore you can't get the loan. I think that risk is minimal. Even though the fund was originally funded with $350 billion, it's very likely that it's going to be getting another at least $250 billion. I don't think it's going to run out of money. If anything, I think there'll be another stimulus bill that extends it. So the reason why I say that is that you can play the timing game if you want to. You can, hold up on applying. I do believe the money is going to be there, and then you wait to apply a little bit, later on down the road when you think things, you'll need it that much more, or even if you plan on bringing your employees back. Right now, though, the rule is that any employees that you did let go, you've got to bring them back by June 30th if you want full forgiveness under this existing program. So that's what the rules say. But we also tell our clients that, listen, if you can't bring them all back, it's not like you lose forgiveness. You're not going to get all of the forgiveness. So long answer to a short question. It depends on your situation, but you need to keep those facts in mind before you make your strategic decision.
But just to follow up on that, the idea being, if you've laid your employees off, or you're thinking, okay, maybe I should lay my employees off temporarily, and then you're saying the idea is wait till June or the end of June, and then you could still bring them back, and then would you pay them retroactively? And again, how do you communicate that to your employees? That's also another complicated element of all of this.
I have thoughts on that, but Steve, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I honestly, I defer to your thoughts on that one. I don't think there are perfect answers to any of these questions, right? Again, every business is going to face different liquidity concerns, have different potential for bringing funds in, and have different potential ability to utilize employees during this interim period. And so I think, and Gene, please jump in, but
yeah,
I think, Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, I mean, if you lay your employees off, they can start collecting unemployment insurance. And one of the biggest issues that, small business owners, what we have right now is that for a lot of employees, that unemployment insurance is pretty darn good. In fact, it could be a lot better than what we're paying our employees. And once you lay an employee off, it's not like you can demand they come back. You might lose them. So that's one risk that you have there. If you even furlough them without pay, again, a lot of employees are going to apply they're entitled to go and apply for unemployment, and therefore, again, they might not come back. Having said that, keeping them on the payroll and paying them when they're not doing anything at all is also sort of counterproductive. So first of all, there's definitely no legal rationale here. I mean, so if you think you could just turn to to the code and look for what the rules are, there really aren't any. It's more of a strategy decision that you do with your business. So just keep in mind that it depends on the relationship you have with your employees. You want to do what's best for them, as long as you're comfortable that in the end, they'll come back and do what's best for you and your business. And I think that's what you want to focus on, is what's best for both of you guys.
Yeah, there's a follow-up question from Ben here about, is an employer doing employees a disservice by offering them work that will jeopardize their unemployment payments, and particularly for lower paid workers that they could, for this period at least, be making more?
Yeah.
How does an ethical employer handle this? This is an existential question.
Yeah, I mean, it really could be doing a disservice to the employee, and if they can get money elsewhere, particularly if you're just making up work for them to do. So, I mean, one of the biggest advantages, guys, of working for a small company, despite the issues that we're all dealing with right now, is that you always have a close relationship with your employer. And therefore, these kinds of situations, in my opinion, should be worked out directly between you and your employee. And the two of you, or the group of you, should determine what's mutually best. And I found, at least with my clients, when they've had similar situations, that they can come to some type of agreement where, tell you what, we'll let you go, you collect unemployment, but please just commit to me that you're going to come back when we decide to have you come back. And in most cases, both employees and employers have been able to come to that kind of arrangement. It's something you can't do in a big company that you can do when you work for a small business.
Can I just ask a terrible follow-up question to that? What do you tell business owners who are small business owners, but who may not need the money, but may think they have technically are eligible for the money? There was a handful of news stories even today, one about a number of hedge funds that have looked to take the money, even though they probably don't need it per se.
So it's Steve. Why don't I jump in on this one? I think that's a fantastic question, Andrew, and one that's likely not getting all the attention that it deserves today, but has the potential to get plenty of attention when things settle down and people look at this afterwards. I think it'd be naive to suggest that there won't be a tremendous amount of attention and scrutiny placed on people applying for these loans after the dust settles. And there are a number of attestations that are needed to be made in all of the forms, in all of the programs, with respect to not just the financial condition, the affiliation status, what you're going to do with the money, but also to the necessity of the loans afterwards. And I certainly would expect that prominent hedge funds or private equity firms or venture capital firms are thinking about this. And the ones who aren't, I think, are being either greedy or foolish or both, because there's no easier target for a prosecutor and for a False Claims Act prosecution, which has both civil and criminal penalties, than billionaire seeks payroll protection plan loan after the fact. And I think you're seeing a lot of folks take both the intellectual approach of this loan's not meant for me, I don't qualify, as well as the ethical and moral approach of this universe of loans was not meant for people and companies like mine. And I think those people are, I certainly can't talk about rewards in this life or the next that those people will get, but certainly I can say that taking that approach, if you don't need the money, to not apply for it is going to keep you in a much safer position vis-a-vis prosecution than taking a more aggressive tone.
And if I could even add on that, first of all, taking the money is unethical. You're taking the money away from people that truly do need it. And there are many small business owners that really need that money. I am seeing some clients of mine, some people, they don't need the money and they're grabbing it and sticking it in the stock market, right? Because hoping to get some, get some gains. It's tempting to do that, and people are just going to be people. But my prediction is just what Steve said. I said once all this smoke clears, I think the Department of Justice is going to be very busy next year going after fraudulent claims. I think they'll be going after those billionaires, but I also think they'll be making some examples of small business as well who filed fraudulent applications, particularly in a time of need. So you should be very, very careful and just don't take what's not yours.
A follow-up to that, in a sense, you've kind of already addressed it, but Peter in Virginia Beach, who's a DealBook reader, wrote in earlier, these federal taxpayer-funded programs, does that mean that these applications will be a matter of public record, or, like you're saying, is this going to be hashed out via litigation if someone catches wind of something untoward?
I think we should assume that the loan applications will eventually be discoverable by Freedom of Information Act requests. And again, I've had a number of clients decline to pursue, even if there's a possible waiver under the affiliation test, but decline to pursue a potential loan because they don't want their name showing up attached to a form seeking a payroll protection plan loan, for example.
That is very interesting. We're almost out of time, so Andrew, I'll throw it back to you for some final thoughts.
Look, I just want to thank Stephen and thank Gene. This was a fantastic conversation, and frankly, I hope we can do it all again. I hope we're not all going to be in this situation where we'll need to do it again. But this is the first of these DealBook helpline calls. We're going to continue doing these DealBook debrief calls, and we'll do another one on Thursday. So I want to thank everybody who's joined us. I want to thank everybody for your questions. We will make a replay of all of this available tomorrow morning in the DealBook newsletter. And to find out more about the full slate of digital events that the New York Times, including DealBook, are putting on, you can visit timesevents.nytimes.com. For now, let me thank everybody once again and wish you all just stay safe and stay healthy. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.